All right, let's talk about the portal a little bit. One of those names that certainly has popped, and this one's interesting. You and I and the rest of the scouting team had some conversations about, how do we, I don't want to say course correct, but, we're in evaluation mode ourselves, right? Especially when it comes to the portal, especially when it comes to NIL. It's a new age of college football. And ultimately, at the end of the day, how do we do our job better from the rankings and everything that's transpired over the last 2 years? What does that look like? And then what does that look like for us path forward, and maybe how we implement that into our process? And the name that's a really good example of that, Cormani McClain at the top, right? And this was a guy, 5-star corner out of Florida in Lakeland. Certainly, if you remember, pretty crazy recruitment. Miami, Alabama, all involved, Florida as well. He ends up at Colorado under Deion Sanders. I've said it. I went on air. I think we knew that going into it, this was going to be a guy that was going to need a presence like Deion Sanders in his life. And I said, if it didn't work out under Colorado and Deion Sanders, I was going to have a lot of questions about the trajectory of his career. And Drew, that's where we are right now. I think he played in 4 games last year. He actually showed some flashes. But Cormani McClain, he was a number 14 player, he's a number 2 corner. I don't think it's ever been about ability with Cormani McClain. But now you look at him kind of as an example, and there's a lot of other examples to go with Cormani McClain where you're like, all right, how do we really kind of balance everything we know about Cormani McClain, what transpired in his recruitment? How do we bake that into the cake? And what I mean by that is, like, this is a guy, if you ask people around Miami, and people around Miami know this, he snubbed Miami, right? When they came and saw him at his school, there were things that you would characterize as red flags all around Cormani McClain. So just over a little bit of a year and a half later, Cormani McClain is in the portal. And now, Drew, you and I, rest of the scouting team, you kind of go back to the drawing board and you say, all right, this is a good case study. How do we recalibrate, or how does this really kind of impact what we do going forward?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. And we've been discussing it behind the scenes. I think the signs were all there. Tools, 19 interceptions in a 2-season span, 4.5 on the lasers in the 40-yard dash, 128-inch broad jump. I think that would rank in the top 5 at the NFL scouting combine. 4.3 in the short shuttle. Obviously, he is long. It's never been about the pure athletic ability. It has been the between the ears type of stuff. I think that has been the question for us. Coop, you brought this up this morning, and I totally forgot about it. Remember when Miami sent their entire staff to Lakeland High School and he wasn't there? That was kind of a foreshadow of what's next. Or how about when he had BYU in his top 5 at some point? That was a bit of a head scratcher to us. I went back to one of the first stories I wrote on Cormani before I think things just spiraled out of control in terms of, I don't want to say it's him or his camp. Like, he just got a little too big. And how do you weigh that in the rankings? It's a great question when we're just trying to project down the line. Something we're going to continue to marinate on. I will say, this is what I wrote in his scouting report that is front facing. Must learn how to block out mistakes and find some inner confidence once adversity hits, but has the physical makeup of a potential impact player for a college football playoff contender and possible early round NFL drafts selection. Could experience some initial growing pains, but freakish traits are worth molding for the long haul. I want to get one other thing out right now. Polk County, where Cormani McClain is from, is going through an epic stretch of washouts. It is not good. So you have Cormani, Keon Zipper, who was a top 247 tight end time with Florida, Lloyd Summerall, top 247 pass rusher, or maybe high 3-star. He went to Florida. Sam McCall out of Lake Gibson, DeMarcus Bowman, Arian Smith at Georgia. I know he's been dinged up. I don't know. I ran this by a few different people that recruit the area. It just seems like these guys are getting to the next level and they're not finding success right away. I think every one of those guys I mentioned besides Arian Smith has transferred. And it's an interesting trend.
Yeah, it's fascinating. It's not it's not just that one pocket, right? I mean, you could go back and I could tell you every move that we've made in the top 247 with some of the 5 stars of one where you put your head on the pillow at the end of the night. Like, let's go back and take a look just off the top of my head, right? Keontae Goodwin was certainly one, signed with Kentucky, coming out, was at Florida, transferred out of Florida. You think about Anthony Lucas, was signed at Texas A&M, now at USC. There was some chatter about him coming out from a character standpoint. Chris Marshall, right? Texas A&M, the Ole Miss Flames out there quickly, now at Boise State. You think about some of the guys at A&M, Smoke Bowie being another one, right? Not a 5-star, but certainly in the top 247. Denver Harris, A&M, cup of coffee at LSU, big expectations. They need him to play. That's something that you have to balance out. And in terms of how it affects us in the rankings, here's the biggest difference, right? It's hard to apply that same standard or investment in terms of character background player 1 through 247. And they're able to do this at the NFL level because, one, it's $1 billion industry. And this is really the job of an area scout. As much as people like to believe, there's a big scouting component of being a scout. There is a huge psychological behavior component of what these guys do and who they talk to when they go to practices, when they go to campus, from the NFL liaison to the position coaches, to the coordinators, to the head coach, to the nutritionist, right? All the way to the janitors. Any type of intel information that they can get on what type of player and what type of people these guys are, that's huge information. The other thing at the collegiate level is you're able to be able to cut your losses relatively soon, right? If it wasn't working out with Cormani McClain, I'm sure there was a lot of conversations that happened between Deion Sanders and Cormani in his camp that said, it's probably best for the both of us to move on here. And as of right now, it's pretty interesting to see, like, 2 names that came up this morning: USC, South Florida. But you think about LSU, and it's like, LSU just went through this with Denver Harris. They have a huge need at corner, but are they going to go back?
What about Alabama?
I'm just using.
Okay,
well, no, you're right. It's the same example that you can apply for multiple programs, right? And the other thing is like the character piece, especially when you get to dollars and cents in the world that we live in, is going to continue to be more and more prevalent, I think, in the evaluation process in terms of who are we investing in, right? Because we don't want to wear the egg on our face at the end of the day. If when the going gets hard, hey, we're going to pull the plug and we're going to go look at our options somewhere else. So there is no shortage of examples of us seeing this happens. And as it applies to our rankings, I think it's something now that we used to say, like me 2 years ago. It's like, hey, let's bet on the athlete, and they figure it out. They figure it out. And if they don't, it is what it is. At least we missed on the right type of physical characteristics. I don't think in my right mind you can apply that same level of thinking going forward, right? So it's going to be interesting, and I think in an industry, quite honestly, that has a really hard time dinging 17 and 18-year-olds. And I completely understand that because they're going through adolescence themselves. But the environment is so important in terms of how these young men develop and who's around them and who's going to be their mentor and what does that look like, right? So, yeah, I mean, this is, a lesson learned, not just Cormani, but I mean, what I name like 5-6 examples of other guys, and I didn't even tap into a whole list of others out there. That was just off the dome.
I was going to say you just rattled them off. Remember Cormani's initial commitment as well? I was in like Lakeland, Florida for that. Everyone thought he was going to Florida, and then he picked Miami, and he had to do the whole thing again because no one believed him. I mean, you always bring it up from when your days in the personnel side. They kind of show you who they are in the recruitment.
Yeah, it's a famous Chris Peterson line, recruits tell you who they are. You just got to listen to them. And if you recruit these guys for a long enough time, 2 years, whatever it is, 2-3 years, you get a pretty good idea of who they are. Peyton Kirkland one is interesting. Committed to Texas without ever taking a visit. You know, I mean, these are things that just kind of add up. You can see the breadcrumbs, right? So those are all things that I think you and I, the rest of the team, is going to continue to pay attention to. And sometimes the talent is so intoxicating that you have to kind of balance it out. But it's pretty interesting that way. So
what do you think about market for him? Where does he land?
I think he's hurt himself, man. I really do. You know, he's been in the public eye for so long. His recruitment was kind of crazy. I think Miami was willing to look past a lot of things. And, you know, I said this, right? Like, you're getting an education from a Hall of Famer, a gold jacket. You say whatever you want about Deion Sanders, but Deion Sanders made that very personal when he recruited Cormani McClain. He got him there that, all right, he was going to expend whatever resources that he needed to make that one work. And if you can't take it from him, who's going to get to you? Who's going to make you realize that this is so real? You know, and if you don't get your act together quickly, it's not just Deion Sanders that's going to say, hey, you know what? Maybe this isn't the right fit. Look around, man. You know, maybe USC is in one of those positions where they're like, hey, we got to take this guy and we got to figure it out. But USF, like, I get it. Van Dyke's over there, right? He's a guy that's very, very close with him. If I was in Cormani's corner, that's probably where I would tell him to go. Like, if that's the one guy that can get to you, and you feel like you need to be in an environment to continue to kind of like humble yourself and build yourself back up, there should be no expectations for Cormani McClain and his personal self. I mean, he's starting from zero, in my opinion. So
yeah, I mean, the messages I've gotten, I don't know what the market is, and it's because it's exactly what you said. It is certainly damaged. He was at an all-time high at some point. He is nowhere close to that right now.
Yeah. Well, if you can't produce and you're a headache, why do I want you on my team?
Hey, here's the other thing I just remembered. Like, missed multiple Under Armour All-America game practices.
Yeah. I often tell everybody, you know, on our team is like, document everything and everything that we do, off the field stuff. You go to a combine, body language, you know, one of these guys tap out, maybe it's a lower body extremity. It's good on good. It's the first time we've seen him. And some of these guys say, you know what, I'm good. All those little things add up to the big picture of how to put the puzzle pieces together ultimately at the end of the day. So pretty interesting there. And Drew, I mean, just to stay along the lines of the general conversation, all these guys from Florida, Tyler Williams, Nyjalik Kelly, Jason Zandamela. Zandamela seems to be in a little bit different of a conversation bucket.
All right, we want to talk about him here in a second?
Yeah, let's talk about him right now. The number 46 player in the 2024 cycle, number one interior offensive lineman from Clearwater, Florida, originally from where? Mozambique?
Yeah. I'm going back to a conversation yeah, he was at Clearwater Academy International. I had a bunch of friends over. Funny conversation about Clearwater. He was at CAI. This is a kid that's only been playing football for 2 years now. Came from Mozambique, like you said, rugby background. Obviously we like him. Number one IOL. I don't think he's the same case as Cormani. I have heard the market for Zandel Mandela is very, very fruitful. I expect him fully to land at an SEC program. I think he's going to be close to home. And I think if that were to happen, I still feel optimistic about Zandel Mandela. I think the reason why he's leaving USC is he is just so far from his base there in Clearwater. And then, you know, it's a 14-hour flight to where he grew up. So Coop, I don't know what you've heard on him. We didn't expect him to play year one, but I believe he was pushing for some playing time, or at least in the 2 deep at USC as a true freshman.
Sounds like 4 programs, at least from what I've been able to piece together. It sounds like Florida, Georgia for sure, Florida State, and Miami.
I've heard UCF. I've heard UCF as well.
Yeah, Miami's interesting. Obviously Mario and Alex Mirabal really invested in the offensive line. You and I kind of talked about it on the show yesterday. Like Florida is one of those groups that I think needs to get right on the offensive line. Zandel Mandela is interesting because he's got guard, center versatility. He's a prototype. He's exactly what you like. Like, I love this kid. He hadn't been playing football for very long, but his floor is already exceptionally high. He's fascinating. He goes to USC. You know, when Zandel Mandela came out and went to USC, it was a little bit of a shocker. And I was kind of like, I don't know if I like that fit long term, right? So now we kind of get to see what that looks like. Stacy Searles at Georgia, Alex Atkins at Florida State, Mirabal at Miami. Like, got some really, really good options. You know, Florida's the one that's fascinating, but I don't know. I kind of wonder, like, I don't know specifically about his situation, but I wonder if Bear Alexander testing the market, then coming back to USC, which just makes me think that he asked for more money. They gave it to him. And then all of a sudden you saw some departures out of LA, right? So sometimes that stuff tends to have a little bit of a ripple effect, but it could be just as easy as that he wants to be closer to home. I don't know if there's one fit out of those four. I kind of like all four of them, quite honestly, for him. So we'll see.
The Florida one's the one I kind of have circled, right? Potential center. You got some other guys there on the interior. They can move to the guard spots. You know, maybe Jason Zamandela saw how DJ Lagway looked in the orange and blue game over the weekend. I don't know. Florida, it's 2 hours from Clearwater. I think that's the one you got to watch.
As we have 330 people watching on YouTube. That's some big numbers right now. 11:48 Central Time. We appreciate it. Make sure to like and subscribe. Also, smash that like button as well. Drew, another name I wanted to talk to you about, because I think you and I weren't split, but I think you saw it a lot more clear than I did because of where you were. And obviously this play was in your region, but Tyler Williams, you know, former top 247 player, number 17 receiver, signs with Georgia, type of profile that we really liked, right? Basketball player, dynamic athlete, but the production was a big question mark. It was really never there. And this was kind of like a calculated roll of the dice. Williams, to me, was one of those guys we had at 111, which would be top end of the fourth round, right? But if it all came together, it's one of those guys like you don't know how high he can go. But now, just a year after he enrolled at Georgia, he's in the portal. Kind of interested to kind of just get your thoughts on. I don't want to speak for you, but I wouldn't be shocked if you're not surprised at this at all.
Yeah, and I was trying to recall this last night in my head. He didn't participate in the Under Armour game because I think he went to bowl practices with Georgia, right? And I think if we had saw him in that setting, I don't know if he finishes at 111. And you're right, Cooper. He was a former quarterback, transitions to wide receiver, like 20 catches as a junior, 33 as a senior, and maybe the quarterback play wasn't the best. You know, he was just kind of one of the top athletes on the field. I think the big question for us was true top end gear, but he had a 6'1", 6'2" frame, you know, good coordination, could win on the perimeter. And you're right, we rolled the dice. In hindsight, would we do it again? I don't know. I mean, having went and saw him play as a senior, I think everything you need to know. And I had a school reach out to me last night and ask about Tyler Williams because he has no footage from Georgia. I think he's played like a handful of snaps, and someone asked for my opinion. I think it says a lot that he didn't break through there in 2 seasons.
I mean, I'm not shocked. I mean, he was kind of like a developmental upside type of guy, right? And I wouldn't be shocked if maybe he finds a soft landing spot and can do some things, right? So we'll see what happens with him. The last one here, Nyjalik Kelly, Drew, former top 100 player, 2022. We talked about him on the broadcast yesterday. It was a big win for Mario, and I still maintain, like, Nyjalik Kelly kind of filled out his role for Mario Cristobal, right? It was a huge perception win when Mario came over from Oregon to Miami. But now Nyjalik on the market, and it doesn't seem like the market would be what you would think for a former top 100 pass rusher who checks a lot of boxes physically. Yeah.
I got clipped by the social team saying, I think, you know, if you're an SEC school, you should look. Some staffer was like, no. I'm like, okay, well, let's put you in the chair and not know that question's coming. I talked about it on the show. He's got shoulder injuries, and I was right. It is multiple shoulder injuries, and I think that derailed his development a little bit there at Miami. And I think he's just asking for too much. I don't know where he's going to land. I also said it on the show that I heard a group of 5 school thought they were going to get him on campus. So that's where we're at in terms of his market right now. Yeah, but the tools are there on the younger side. Sometimes it just doesn't all come together.
Yeah, if you don't have the pieces to the puzzle, especially from a medical standpoint, there's going to be a big range on terms of maybe where we see him, some confusion of why he's in the portal to begin with, to where you thought of some things and say, hey, well, this would be a tough one for us to kind of pull the trigger on.
All right. Any names in the portal that have entered? Like, I feel like we just talked negative on so many guys, but like people you're just fired up about. Do you have any names?
Quite honestly, I gotta go ahead, rattle some off.
I'm a
speaking of unprepared questions.
Oh, I put that in the rundown. All right, this Eli Stowers kid from New Mexico State that's in the portal. He was when we ended the show yesterday. He was one of the top 10 available for 24/7 Sports. I'm all in on this kid. Okay, former quarterback, top 247, goes to New Mexico State because he transfers in from Texas A&M. They play him at wide receiver. I'm buying as much stock as I can get in this dude. He's got a crazy track and field background. I think he's supposed to visit Vandy. Barton Simmons, good friend of us here at 24/7 Sports, is probably pissed that I keep hyping him up, but he's one name where I'm like, whoa, okay, I'm fired up about this guy. And then Coop, I talked about this individual previously on our one of the editions of our shows. It might have been Preps to Pros, might have been Oyster Boys Radio, but Zachary Toby, corner at Illinois, started 3 games as a freshman, 6'1" corner, played really well. He entered yesterday. That flew completely under the radar. You think about all the teams out there that need corner help. I wonder, if someone's been working the back channels with him, and no one's really written anything about him yet, but a kid out of Central Florida, played as a freshman, has the tools. Those are 2 that are completely out of left field that fire me up.
I don't know if it was just because I was in the host chair yesterday or what, but there's, as we're doing the show, there wasn't really one that came to mind. Jacoby Matthews, from Texas A&M. What's interesting about him, he can't transfer to another SEC program. Oregon's been linked to him. I'm sure we'll have a hot market as well, just with a highly touted defensive back coming out, who's actually has some starting experience. But outside of that, man, there was nothing that really kind of like caught my eye and was like, sure. We're going to talk about Damian Martinez and some of these guys, receiver for Penn State, but there was no like, oh, that's kind of sneaky,
What about what do you think the market is for Juuri Brown transferring out of Miami?
I don't know. I don't know enough about his situation. And, I know his name has kind of come up. It's pretty interesting to see. Like, that just seems to be like a disconnect between what's happening behind the scenes and maybe what a team like Miami thinks of Juuri Brown, what his market is in actuality, versus how the player is perceived just by the general audience, if that makes sense.
I think, and I said this in the control room, I think if you're one of these schools out here that has an established quarterback, okay, so you know who your starter is in 2024, but you're going to have a battle in 2025, and you got some young guys in there. I would roll the dice on Juuri Brown, and obviously, you're going to have to pay a price to get him. That's one of the primary reasons why he's stuck at Miami. He has said that on podcasts, but he has started 3 games, right? So, and he has flashed in those games. Like, put him on the roster, try to develop him, get him in a battle at some point down the line. But, if worse comes to worse, he's someone that has some game experience, like, break glass and you're not rolling out a true freshman if you're a college football playoff contender, like a Brock Glenn. I don't know. I'm not selling stock in him. My player comp was always Hendon Hooker. Hendon Hooker had to transfer and reboot his career. So that's just my take on Jacurri.
What about Georgia Tech? You know, they got Haynes King there, right, for another year, and then he's out.
Yeah, but Georgia Tech has like recruited that quarterback position kind of well recently. They took 2 high school kids last year. The kid out of South Lake Carroll, Aaron Philo, who's one of the most prolific passers ever in the Peach State, and then they got my guy Grady Adamson committed here, and yeah, that's a good one. I think the offensive he would fit that offense.